Solving one-step equations with absolute value. After watching this video, I will be able to solve a one-step equation with absolute values. So let's just remember that there are two different numbers that we can have in absolute value bars that have the same number. So for example, the absolute value of a positive 7 is 7 because it's 7 units away from 0 on the right side. Then we have negative 7, which is also 7 because it's 7 units away from 0 on the left side. So there are two possibilities for whatever is an inside absolute values. So if we were to fill in this chart, positive 5 has an absolute value of 5, negative 5 has an absolute value of 5. Positive 8 has an absolute value of 8, negative 8 has an absolute value of 8. Positive 1 has an absolute value of 1, negative 1 has an absolute value of 1. So when we're trying to solve equations, we have to factor in these two possibilities. So that means that we're going to have two cases or two equations. Because we're dealing with an absolute value bar that's going to equal 17, then this stuff inside the absolute values has to be 17 or negative 17. So we have two cases where we set up our equation equal to the positive and equal to the negative, and we solve them independently from each other. So I'm going to do the inverse operation to isolate f. So f has to equal 12 and f has to equal negative 22. So let's see how that works. If I were to replace my answer to check, 12 plus 5 gives me 17. The absolute value of 17 is 17. Check. Or negative 22 plus 5. Well, that gives me negative 17. Absolute value of 17, negative 17 is 17. Check. So those are the two possibilities that f has to equal to make this equation true. So we're going to set up our two cases. X over 6 has to equal positive 5. X over 6 has to equal a negative 5. And now we're going to do our inverse operation. So we're going to multiply by 6 on both sides. X is equal to 30. We're going to multiply by 6 on both sides. X is equal to negative 30. So remember, when we're dealing with absolute value equations, we're always setting up these two cases. One where our absolute value bars has to equal a positive number, and one where our absolute value bars has to equal a negative number. And then we are solving them independently from each other. So we do our inverse operation just like we would for solving regular equations. X is equal to 10. X is equal to negative 6. You should always have two answers for solving for absolute value equations. Now you try. Press pause, see if you can answer this question, then press play to see if you got the answer correct. Pause your video now. Okay, so we're setting up our two cases. Case number 1, where my absolute value bars equals something positive. So it equals positive 17, and then one where my absolute value bars equals a negative 17. And then we're going to solve independently from each other. So R is equal to 10. R is equal to negative 24. You want to rate your ability to do this skill. If you are at a 1, you should be asking for more assistance. If you're at a 2, you should just try and do your independent practice. See if you're getting your answers correct. If you're at a 3 or 4, you are ready to move on.